Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. Today, we're zoning in on Leviticus chapter 2. It's got these really, really specific instructions for the grain offering.
That's right. It's one of several offerings laid out there, but this one's distinct. It's about grain, oil, incense, not animals.
Yeah.
A very particular kind of presentation.
Okay, let's get right into it. So, the most basic version, what does it start with?
It starts simple. Just fine flour, then you pour oil on it and add frankincense on top. Seems pretty straightforward at first glance.
Fine flour, oil, incense, but then it gets ritualistic. You bring it to the priests.
Hmm.
What happens next? What's their part?
Right. The priest's action is crucial. They take a portion, just a handful of the flour and oil mixture, but crucially, all the frankincense.
All of it. Okay.
Yeah, all the incense. And that specific handful, that portion, is what gets burned on the altar.
And the text calls it a memorial portion. What does that, imply? A memorial.
It's an interesting phrase, isn't it? Suggests it's not just being consumed, but it's bringing something to remembrance before the Lord. It's described as an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. That's the part for God, so to speak.
An aroma pleasing to the Lord. Okay, so if only a handful is burned, what about the rest? The stuff you brought.
Good question. The rest of it, the bulk of the flour and oil, doesn't go on the altar fire. It's actually set aside for the priests, Aaron and his sons.
For the priests.
Yes, the text says it belongs to Aaron and his sons. And it calls this remainder a most holy part of the offerings made to the Lord by fire.
Most holy. Even though it's not burned. That seems counterintuitive, maybe.
It does highlight something important, I think. Holiness isn't solely defined by being burned on the altar. The provision for the priests, their sustenance derived from these offerings, is also profoundly sacred. It's directly linked.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, besides just raw flour, the text mentions other ways to prepare it. Baked, cooked.
Exactly, it gets detailed. You could bake it in an oven, either as cakes or thin wafers, or prepare it on a griddle, or even cook it in a pan.
And were there common rules for all those methods?
Yes,
Wow.
key things. Always find flour and oil. And if it was baked or cooked on a griddle, it absolutely had to be made without yeast. Unleavened.
Unleavened. Okay, here come the big rules. What's the major prohibition? The thing you absolutely cannot have in a grain offering meant for the altar fire.
This is really striking. No yeast and no honey. The text is explicit. Don't burn any yeast or honey as part of the fire offering, the pleasing aroma.
No yeast, no honey. Why do you think that is? What's the symbolism there?
Well, yeast causes rising, fermentation. It's often linked to symbolism of corruption or puffing up, change. And honey, while natural and sweet, might represent perhaps earthly sweetness or natural processes rather than the sort of pure, unchanging quality desired for the altar fire itself.
Interesting. So things associated with natural change or decay are out for the fire part.
Seems to be the idea. Though it's worth noting, they could be brought as first fruit offerings, just not burned on the altar as the pleasing aroma.
Okay. And then there's the one ingredient that's always required, the flip side of the prohibition.
Yes, salt. Absolutely essential. Season all your grain offerings with salt, it says. Do not leave the salt of the covenant of your God out of your grain offerings. Add salt to all your offerings.
The salt of the covenant. Wow. Salt preserves, right? It stops decay. It feels like it symbolizes permanence, maybe fidelity.
Precisely. It's often interpreted that way. Salt endures. It seals agreements. So, in contrast to yeast or honey, it speaks to the unchanging nature of the covenant relationship. It must be there.
So the contrast is really stark. No agents of change like yeast, but always the agent of preservation, salt.
Exactly. And quickly, there's one more specific type mentioned, the first fruits offering.
Oh, right, the first grain of the harvest?
Yes. For that, it was heads of new grain, crushed, and then roasted over the fire. Again, you'd add oil and incense, and the priest would burn a memorial portion of that roasted grain. Same principle.
So summing up Leviticus 2 then, it's this incredibly meticulous guide. Fine flour, oil, incense, different cooking methods possible, but the core rules are firm. Unleavened for anything baked or griddled, absolutely no yeast or honey burned on the altar, but always includes salt, the salt of the covenant.
Yeah, the level of detail is fascinating. It makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
These aren't just casual instructions or recipes. They're commands for something deeply sacred. What does this kind of precision, especially about what's excluded, yeast, honey, and what's demanded, salt in the fire, suggest to you about the reverence, the seriousness, the very nature of the relationship being acted out in these ancient rituals? Something to ponder.